Welcome back. Now, Israel yesterday carried out powerful airstrikes near Syria's presidential palace and on the military headquarters in the heart of Damascus, a major escalation in its bombardment of the neighboring country. At least 3 people were killed and 34 others were wounded in the attacks on Damascus. Now, this comes, of course, in the town of al-Suwaidia, where fighting has occurred between the Sunni Bedouin tribes and the Druze community. Joining me now on the line to discuss this, I'd like to welcome no stranger to us here at News in Focus, Naeem Jeenah, who is the director of the Afro-Middle East Centre. Naeem, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Naeem, looking at these strikes yesterday, it's quite clear that when we see Israel's intent of wanting to go ahead and really create chaos amongst the Middle East. We saw what they did with Iran around 5 weeks ago, and it kind of seems a similar pattern had followed when we look at what happened yesterday in Syria.
Yes. So, a few kind of objectives, if you like, for why Israel, or reasons for why Israel bombed Syria. Of course, they have been bombing Syria since the 6th of December last year. Since the new government came in, but also before that. They were bombing, you remember they bombed an Iranian consulate in Syria and numerous Iranian bases, etc. before that. So this is not new. But yesterday, bombing in Damascus, in the center of Damascus, I think is a different kind of escalation. The one thing is that Israel expected or hoped that the new government under Ahmad al-Sharaa will normalize relations with Israel. Not only has that not happened, but there's been a normalization of relations between Syria and the U.S. without Israel being part of that. And so the one thing is to send a message both to the Americans and to the Syrians that Israelis will not accept this kind of thing. The second issue is that the Israeli policy about Syria for decades now has been that it's in Israel's best interest if Syria is kept as unstable as possible. Creating strife between different sects, and in Suwaidia, this kind of some level of conflict between the Druze community and the Bedouins is not something new. So exploiting tensions that might exist or creating new tensions is a good way of keeping all role players in Syria occupied with their own internal issues, keeping it unstable, which means that Israel can exploit it as much as possible. Now, we remember, of course, that at the moment Israel is occupying hundreds of square kilometers of Syrian territory. They had, since 1967, been occupying the Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory under international law. That's an illegal occupation. And then from the 6th of December last year, increasingly more and more Syrian territory, even depopulating some areas of hundreds of people in order to create their military zone there. So they want to take over parts of Syrian territory while at the same time keeping Syrians fighting among each other. And then the third reason, of course, is that yesterday was the appearance of Netanyahu in court on corruption charges. So he did appear in court, and while he was in court, the bombing of Damascus started, and the court was adjourned as a result. And he's been playing this game now for years to try and ensure that he actually never is accountable for his corruption issues. So there's also that kind of personal motive in a sense. This whole thing about protecting the Druze, etc., is absolute rubbish. There's a Druze population.
I wanted to ask on that, Naeem, because Israel has come out and passionately said, we will defend the Druze community. I want to quote Itamar Ben-Gvir saying, we must protect them against, quote unquote, the jihadists. And of course, everyone knows how powerful Itamar Ben-Gvir can be when he screams at the television screens. I just wanted to get your take on that.
No, the Israelis have no love. The Zionists have no love for the Druze at all. There's a Druze community in Israel, the majority of whom live in the Golan Heights, the occupied Golan Heights. They are Syrians, technically. And those who live in Israel, the Druze community, are discriminated against. Basically, they're Palestinians. They're regarded as Druze Arabs. They're not called Palestinians, of course. And they're discriminated in various kinds of ways. Not in the same way as other Palestinians, because as part of its kind of divide and conquer thing, the Israelis have ensured that the Druze, for example, serve or are conscripted into the Israeli occupation forces. So they have a certain level of privilege above other Palestinians in Israel. But they're discriminated against. When Israel bombs Lebanon, which is the other place where there are Druze communities present, they don't check whether there's Druze or Muslims or Christians when they're bombing. There's no love for the Druze. There's no love for the protection of Druze lives. And also, the Druze community in Sueda, a good part of them has said that they don't want Israeli support, even though there's an armed conflict going on. They don't want Israeli support because they realize that actually makes them seem as if they're enemies to the state that they're part of. Now, the Israelis have exploited or recruited a proxy chief sheikh from within the Druze community in Sueda, and he is serving Israeli interests. So when they bombed Damascus, just a few hours before that, there was a ceasefire signed in Sueda, and then they bombed Damascus. And this chief that they have, the Israelis have, then said, there's no ceasefire existing, and violence started again. So it's got nothing to do with the Druze. This is just a convenient issue for the Israelis to, as I say, ensure that Syria remains unstable for as long as possible. If it wasn't the Druze, they'll make up some story about the Kurds. If it wasn't the Kurds, they'll make up a story about the Alawis, as if they're the protectors of minorities all over the world.
Naeem, yesterday in the White House, of course, during a media scrum, a question was asked to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and he said it was a misunderstanding. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Well, I'm not sure what his misunderstanding was. He has, however, come out saying that he's expressed concerns with the Israeli actions, as other American politicians or officials have as well. And the issue here is that it seems that the Israelis undertook this action, bomb Damascus, without consultation with the Americans. That's quite likely. And so for the Americans, it's also a bit of a humiliation, not only that they were not consulted, but this comes days after Trump and Sharar signed an agreement, and the HTS was removed from the American terror list. And so not only is it a bombing of the Syrians, but also a slap in the face of the Trump administration. And I think that is partly why many of their officials are somewhat unhappy.
We've just got 2 minutes, Naeem. Ahmed al-Shara has played a very good diplomatic stance on this. Of course, when he addressed the nation earlier on today, he said that the aim and the only aim is to try and go ahead and unify Syria after decades, of course, of the turmoil brought upon by the Assad regime. It's not just an intelligent way of doing things, Naeem, but it's also what he wants to do right now, given what Syria has gone through over these decades of the Assad regime, to try and make sure that this unification that he is trying to achieve is done so in not only in a non-violent manner, but in a manner that can bring Syria to where it was before.
Yeah, I mean, we hope that that his words are sincere, but the reality is that this government has been in place for less than 7 months, right? It's a transition that is, we can't even say after a civil war, because in some ways the civil war conditions are still there, as we're seeing in Sueda. There are parts of the northeastern part of the country that's occupied by the Americans, with the support of Kurdish groups there. So the country is not unified, and this has been, since December last year, this has been top of the agenda, of course. It would be for any government that came in Syria, it would be the priority to unify the country because of the ways in which the previous regime had manipulated and exploited sectarian differences to create divisions, to unify the country, to ensure the territorial integrity of the country, to get back under a central control all parts of that country. Now already that's compromised by parts being occupied by the United States. Also from December, parts being occupied by Israel. And so, he and his government have an unenviable task to resolve this. But this is the highest priority for that government, because a unified country with a unified nation means that they would then be able to tackle the massive problems that they have in terms of reconstruction, in terms of building the economy, etc. So we hope that that is sincere in that message, but clearly from a political perspective, that would be the highest priority of any government.
Naeem, always a pleasure having you, and shukran so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That is Naeem Jeenah, the director of the Afro-Middle East Centre. After the break, I'm going to be chatting to Nazir Jamal all the way. He's still in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia for the Global Muslim Content Summit. How important was this in terms of Muslim media and content that is pushed out there? Do stay tuned for that conversation.